You're watching the Chucktown Wind Report Extended Weekend Outlook from Friday, October the 16th through Monday, October the 19th. Okay, so here comes our cold front that we talked about last time, heading down into the southeast region. And this cold front looks rather weak, and it looks like it picked up a little bit of moisture that trained in off of this upper level low that moved in north of Baja. So we had a little bit of moisture streaming up from the Pacific Ocean, join the boundary. And so what we're seeing is a line of precipitation in between two dry air masses from high pressure ridge to the south and a very strong high pressure ridge wedging down from the north. So dry air on both sides and lots of upper level shear means that there's not going to be a lot of thunderstorms associated with this cold front. It's going to be mostly in the form of light mixed rain, so we may see some scattered drizzles and maybe some sprinkles here and there, but I don't think we're going to get very much accumulation, especially in South Carolina, as this cold front gets a little bit hung up on the Appalachians later today and then pushes through overnight. So we may see a little bit of a low pressure develop somewhere along the South Carolina-Georgia border from it sometime early tomorrow morning, but then that'll move quickly out. I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of winds for this. Now, right now we have this lobe of high pressure, this center of high pressure that built from 1016 to 1020 millibars at the surface. So really what that's doing is this old boundary here to the south that was over Key West lifted a little bit overnight. It pushed through down to southern Florida yesterday and then lifted a little bit overnight. And what it's doing is creating an area troughing over this area. So we're seeing some northeast to east-northeast winds biting down or wedging down behind this boundary where there's an increased gradient, especially over the Tampa Bay area. And they're seeing some low to mid-teens and then some upper teens in the nocturnal values overnight during cooling. And those numbers are starting to come down now, but we could see some pulses throughout the day to the Tampa Bay area from the northeast or east-northeast directions along just north of this boundary where this gradient is tightened. This high pressure continues to slowly drift out into the Atlantic. So the high pressure, we talk about that for just a second here. Now as this high drifts out into the Atlantic this afternoon, we're expecting a very weak return southerly flow, whereas we had a larger high pressure building. Now we have a weaker high pressure, or a high pressure that's moving out to the Atlantic to weaken. And the center is going to be nearby, so that means even weaker flow. We do have a southwest flow ahead of this boundary. I looked at the low-level jetting. It's about 15 to 25 miles an hour, which suggests weak low-level jets ahead of this cold front. It won't even be enough to give any nocturnal values for an evening surge tonight, but around this high pressure we can expect modest low teens today, south or south-southwesterly winds ahead of the boundary, and I'm not expecting very much in lieu of moderates. I think the harbor may see some mid-teens pulses like mid to late afternoon as winds funnel in between the land masses, but we have yet to see anything strong ahead of this cold front develop, especially with this center of high pressure sort of in the middle of it all. If that wasn't there, if this was more out in the Atlantic, we'd have a stronger southerly flow on slate for today. Okay, so let's take a look at the jet stream. Now, the jet stream has now been put at 300 millibars for general purposes. This is our polar jet now. We've started to transition from the subtropical jet that we get in the spring and summer, which usually meanders up from the Pacific and sort of comes across the United States and meanders up to the north slowly, and that's where we get all of our warm air masses coming up. And that has receded now to the south, so we're seeing more of a negative tilt to that subtropical jet. And in unison with that, we have a zonal flow in between both jets and a strong flow wedging down from Canada. So we have a cool air mass, actually a cold air mass, for a cold for many, as some of these folks up here in the north will start to see some freezing temperatures and possible snows as we get later into the weekend and early next week. But the 300 millibar jet stream is about 30,000 feet. It is our polar jet. The subtropical jet's a little higher up at 250 millibars, or 36,000 feet. So we're starting to get into our winter months, and we're going to see more and more of these dips in the jet stream. When we have these negative tilts in the jet stream, they start to sharpen when they get to the east coast. Now our El Nino is suggesting that we're going to have more of these dips that actually come down in this direction. So these are called Rossby waves when we see these sharp dips in the jet stream that push straight down into the south or deep south or the southeast region. So we'll continue to watch those as they happen. That's just symptomatic of when we start getting to our fall months, when we start seeing these blasts of cool air, and then they become more and more as we get into the winter time. Okay, so let's take a look at the run for the week. My apologies, I was getting ready to go to the next map. I want to take take this to the next. So as we get into today, we start to see that dip sharpen. And as we get into Saturday, and here goes Sunday morning, and then into the afternoon. Here's Monday. You can see that dip really sharpen, and right behind this is going to be where this cool, really cold air mass takes a dive down into the southeast. So we're going to start to see temperatures really drop there. We're getting to the upper 30s to low 40s for lows, and then we'll probably just stay in the upper 50s and possible low 60s along the coastline where the warmer waters are. So that's going to be our first cool air mass for the year in the southeast region. Okay, look at the water vapor imagery, and here you can make out this dry air mass over the south where the high pressure has sinking air going on, and we see this next mass of dry air pushing down behind the frontal boundary. Now here's the frontal boundary right here, and then here comes that cold air diving down along the jet stream to the north out of Canada. So that you can clearly see. Let's go to water vapor imagery loop straight over continental United States, and once again, here is our cold front. Dry air masses ahead and behind. Alright, earth.nullschool.net. I really like this map. This does such a wonderful job of depicting the winds across the globe, and they're not always exact. It's about 3 hours on the updates, but it does give you a really good picture of what's going on. So even right here you can see this crease in the atmosphere, and that is exactly where our cold front is, and you can see the switch in directions. So when we talk about these northerly winds diving down behind it, that's going to be our next player for the weekend. It's going to be northerly winds building down behind the cold front. So if we go back to our surface map, we're looking at this right here. This is going to be sort of wobbling down into the southern or the Midwest states, and then eventually down across into the southeast region. Now what happens here is going to be tricky, because we're going to be looking at a northerly flow behind this cold front boundary as we see northerly winds driving down behind it. And the question is going to be is when this high pressure gets here, it's going to have two different tracks. It's either going to head in this direction to the east over the Carolinas, or it's going to have more of a track that takes it up to the northeast and parks it over Virginia, Maryland, somewhere in this vicinity here. Now the difference in these positions is one has a stronger northeast effect on South Carolina all the way down into Georgia. The other one has more of a strong, this one here would have more of a northerly effect and closer to the center. So that means the winds might be a little bit weaker here as long as this trough parks off the coastline. So we're expecting this cold front boundary to park right out here, and then some of this troughing behind it to stick near the coastline, and that's where the gradients get tightened as high pressure wedges down behind it, sort of like what we're seeing right here over Tampa Bay this morning. So that's going to be the big question. Are we going to have high pressure to our north, or are we going to have high pressure closer overhead? So the further away it is to this area, the stronger our winds are going to be. The closer it is, the weaker our winds are going to be. So the northeast winds, it looks like for now, what we're looking at in the immediate future is a high pressure developing here, and then we're going to see northerly winds starting Saturday and going on through Sunday. So it's going to be more of an offshore flow. As we get into Monday, we start to see the winds sort of bend in direction more to the northeast to east northeast, and we could get some of that backdoor sea breezing effect where the winds bend to the east northeast along the coastline, specifically to the beaches. So we'll wait and see there. Monday, that will go Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday as we get a large ridge of high pressure setting up. It should eventually make for a large ridge of high pressure to our north to keep that east-northeast flow going, or northeast flow going along our coastline. So that's to be expected as we get into Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. The big question will be, will it turn onshore Sunday? I think Saturday it's going to be north. Sunday it's going to be a struggle to get to northeast, and then as we get into Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, I think we're going to have that onshore lean. Now speeds, Saturday probably starts out mid-teens, maybe some initial higher surges as that northerly wind really cranks down behind the cold front. As we get into Sunday, we see those initial surges back off, and then we see more of a settled flow, but it's probably going to be north-northeast, and we may see 18 to 23 knots, 18 to 22 knots, somewhere in that vicinity. And as we get into Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, especially Monday being the first day of those east-northeasterly leans along the coastline, we'll probably see some of the highest maximum winds that we get around 20 to 22 knots, somewhere in that vicinity. maybe even higher impulses, and then Tuesday slightly less and Wednesday slightly less. So we're ending up with low 20s to upper teens to mid to upper teens in succession from one day to the next. Okay, let me go back to earth.nullschool.net. Here's our high pressure centered right about here. Let me get the editing tool out again. My apologies. Here it is right here, and this is going to drift out into the Atlantic and give us that return southerly flow behind it that you're seeing. So right now we sort of had this west-northwest land breezing going on. The jet stream, I did want to show you this, and this is what I like about earth.nullschool.net. As we go higher up, we're going to do 250 HPA, which is close to 250 millibars. It's as close to 300 millibars as we can get on this product, but you can really see these upper level jets cranking down from the north. So we're already seeing that upper level flow. We're talking about 100 to 120 knots speeding across the upper atmosphere, and that's why this cold front that's approaching, we even have a jet coming up from the south to meet it right across northern Florida into Georgia where this zonal flow is. This cold front, the reason why it's going to be so weak without thunderstorms along that upper level shear is because any cloud tops that develop over a certain height, they're just going to be ripped off from the low level convection that's causing it to build. So that's how we get such weak cold fronts and simply rain, because the upper level jetting in the upper level atmosphere and the shear factor is just so high, it just won't allow for it. Okay, so if we look at our numerical model predictions, here's the GFS. The Euro is pretty much in agreement with this. Now, as we get into, let me back up a little bit here. I want to see how Saturday, for tomorrow morning, we see the high pressure developing out to the west over Oklahoma and Missouri area. And as we start moving ahead in time into Saturday night and into Sunday, here's the high pressure sort of wobbling across and then becoming a stronger center. And you see 1,033 millibars. Remember, we talked about this high pressure being 1,031 to 1,035 millibars. So it looks like it's going to hold. And here's where the center is by Monday, early morning Monday, actually Sunday night. So as we go into time, we keep going. You can see this northerly flow developing right here. That's why I'm saying this north to north-northeast flow will continue here on through Sunday night. So that's why I'm thinking Saturday and Sunday we will not see an onshore flow. We might start to see that on Monday. As we go into time, we'll run the GFS a little bit further. We see the high pressure starting to collect over Kentucky. The winds become a little bit more northeast along our coastline. And then as we get into Monday afternoon and Monday night, into Tuesday early morning, we see that lobe of high pressure. Now the GFS has this a little bit closer to us where the center is. The Euro has it a little bit further to the north. That's going to be the big question. Which way is it going to go? To the south or to the north? Ideally for moderate winds for us, if that's what you're a fan of, kiteboarding or any other high wind sports, that would be the scenario you'd want to the north, and then lighter winds to the south. All right, let's look at data scope. From weather flow, here's Tampa. Right now we're seeing 14 knot winds, and this is Tampa Bay Cut Jade right out in the middle. And you can see the winds are slowly starting to fade in this area, and I'm going to go ahead and run all the models for today. Now the models didn't even pick up on the nocturnal surge as they normally wouldn't because of the cold air advection factor. So they don't always pick up on everything. When they're in agreement direction, that's usually what I will agree with on, but speed's usually left up to the human factor for cooler air advection processes and sea breezing effects. Sometimes the models just do not pick up on some of these nuances along the coastline. So here is the forecast models for today. They keep it on the lower end in the low teens to near 10 knots. I think we still may see a couple of pulses here and there. Oops, let me load that again. Looks like it blipped out on me. Okay, here we go. So as we go out in time with these models, the high resolution models, the HRR3K only goes 12 hours. These models fall off because they only go out so far in their exactness. And as we go in time, we see 10 knots, low teens. I think we may see a few more extra pulses today. Like I said, as we get into tomorrow, though, we see these winds really kind of max out in the upper single digits to near 10 knots. I still think we may see some low teens pulses through Saturday along that northerly flow as the high pressure reorganizes to the north, and then the cold front comes through. It fizzles out, doesn't even have doesn't have very much effect down into Florida. And then as we get into Sunday, that's when you start to see your northeast winds really crank up. So I think by late morning into midday, by Sunday, you'll start to see these real effects from that high pressure wedging down from the north, and that will continue right on through Monday, Tuesday, and then finally fade out on Wednesday. All right, so I'm going to go to Charleston, South Carolina, back to our neck of the woods at Chucktown, and take a peek at what's going on right now in our area. So we have, here's our west-northwesterly land breeze occurring at 6 knots. It's always very light wind to start the day for these land breezes. And as we go out into the day, I'm going to go ahead and run these models as well. I think what we'll find is probably most models in agreement with a modest wind for today. Okay, so here we go. Here's our run. We see some of the higher resolution models coming up. The HER 3K comes up to low teens, and that's the only one that comes up to low teens today. So it's not looking very favorable when all the models are in agreement with lower winds. That's usually an indication that we are going to have a weaker pattern now. Can we add the human factor in to add a few knots to that? Sure, but not very favorable for it. I think we're going to stay in low teens along with these models. Now here come the northerly winds starting Saturday. They're all in agreement with the north or north-northeast flow. And then maybe we may see some upper teens develop late morning and into the early afternoon. And then as we get into Sunday, here's our north-northeast flow continues, but starts to build even stronger to the open areas along like the Charleston Harbor, north tip of Folly Beach. And then as we get into Monday, we start to see that lean and then the winds coming up. Now, I think these models could be, they will probably go through a few adjustments with several ups and downs along them as we get further out into time. But as we get into Tuesday and Wednesday, they show a fade. I'm not very much in agreement with that. So I think we're going to see this mid to upper teens or upper teens to low 20s really bite in on Monday, and then probably back down a little bit on Tuesday to upper teens, higher than what these models are suggesting, just based on where the high pressure is going to be located. Okay, so Charleston, when we talk about the open areas for the northerly winds for land shadowing effects, these kind of areas right here that are more exposed to northerly winds are the ones that usually see the highest. So when we have this north-northeasterly flow, these island tips tend to do better than anywhere else, whereas these locales at the beach are offshore and land shadowed, so there's a lot of mechanical and surface roughness issues going on there that the sensors don't pick up. So that is the Charleston area. And I think that's going to do it for our Chucktown wind report. One more little thing, sea surface temperatures are still continuing to fall just a little bit. We're right around 70 to 72 degrees as these nighttime temperatures continue to drop further and further. And I did want to look at the 2-meter air temperature, and we see Tuesday. Let me back up just a little bit, go back to Sunday. Here goes our temperature falls. So here's Sunday morning when we wake up. We're looking at 40s for the South Carolina coast, and if we get further down into Monday morning, we see upper 30s upstate to lower 40s down in the low country in the Charleston area. We could be near 50 strictly along the coastline, but that's just an idea of how cool our temperatures are going to get. Highs are only going to meet upper 50s, low 60s, and the low temperatures are going to be backing down to the 40s. Okay, so that will do it for the Chucktown wind report, and thanks for watching.